Hello everyone, and welcome back to another fireside chat. Today, I have with me Brian Sanders, who is a filmmaker, who is a healthy living enthusiast, who strongly believes in raising animals the right way, and using meat from those animals to feed us to make sure that we stay healthy. And one of the things that I've recently learned about Brian is that he also went, or he actually, I think he initiated a trip to the Hadza, one of the remaining hunter-gatherer tribes that we still have left, and so he stayed with the Hadza for a while. And today we're going to talk about, among other things, what he learned and how we can translate how those people still live today to our modern life to keep us healthy and make sure we are at peak performance, right? Peak human performance. I see the sign back there in the background, so that's really what we should be striving for. And with that said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Brian. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, how you ended up where you are right now, how you started. You're working on a docu series right now that talks all about how we should be eating and how that applies to our planet, the health of our planet, the health of the animals, and obviously to our health as well. So we talk a little bit about that, and then anything, we'll see where it leads, and we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'm got my fingers in a lot of things these days. And it all started with making this docu-series. It turns into a 6-part series. And I think the whole world kind of wants to know what to eat. It's super complicated and it's
Yeah.
individual. There's a lot of factors, right? It's like what your preferences are, how you're raised, the culture, all this stuff. And what we do know is it's not going well for people. There's like the classic study that 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. You walk around, you can see it. And I think we just need to have a better understanding of food. And so my journey started with my own understanding of food and how that changed and the health of my family. So I actually lost both my parents when I was about 30. So this was 8 years ago. So I'm 38 now. It was also, I turned 30. It's like you can't just eat whatever you want anymore, kind of. I was always playing sports and doing all that stuff, and I could get away with eating a suboptimal diet, but I didn't know that I wasn't getting away with it, actually. I thought I
Yeah.
was doing fine. And then once I made some simple changes, all these problems went away. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I wasn't doing fine. I was just
Mhm.
like a standard American turning into a dad bod, like so many of these people, they're trying to normalize the dad bod now. I hate that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you don't want it's like, oh yeah, it's so cute. He has a fat belly. I'm like, no, that's like insulin resistance and like, metabolic disorder basically going on. So
Yeah.
it all kind of happened around 30. And when my parents and they have kind of this similar story of not being recognized by the medical system as having a problem, just following the government guidelines. We were like following the food pyramid diet. I grew up in Hawaii. We were just eating heart healthy whole grains,
Right.
like lean chicken breasts, like avoiding fat, eating like low fat products, doing that whole thing and thinking we were doing everything right. And their doctors never told them anything. And now looking back, I realized they had all the signs of prediabetes, all the metabolic problems. No one told them anything. And then they just got cancer, Alzheimer's, all these things that just get people around the world, really. And a lot of people don't even realize that cancer and Alzheimer's specifically are very metabolic problems. They can
Hmm.
be, not all cancers, but people just think of type 2 diabetes or obesity as diet related. It's like, oh, of course, those two, but there's so many more, right? It's kind of everything. And that kind of leads to the whole hunter gatherer thing, right? That's why I went to Africa as part of the film to see how people live. And we'll get into it later. I don't want to give it all away, but the quick thing is they don't live with chronic disease like we do, and so that's part of my journey is understanding how do we avoid all this chronic disease.
But that's
That's not
because they
how
all die at the age of 30, right?
and that's not true either. Yeah, I love that myth. They all die at 30. Actually, you know what? The average age of death was 30 for like everyone in the world up until recently. Like even in modern
Mm.
society, like throughout the last couple thousand years, the average age of death was 32 because so many people died early. Even
Hmm.
throughout the Middle Ages, I mean, it was even lower. I think we had very poor nutrition back then, and people, I think it was like 25 was the average age of death because so many people were dying from basically poor nutrition and malnutrition. But anyway, yeah, we'll get into the whole age of death thing too. But what I found is that they lived well, they lived long. It's about health span too, right? Instead of lifespan, because maybe they did die of other things, or they don't have the easiest life. They're living outdoors with animals and accidents and all kinds of things. But what they did do is they lived well into old
Hmm.
age, and this is the normal default for humans. That's what I found out. And I've interviewed people all over the world as part of this film for the past 5 years and part of my podcast. And I talk to all kinds of people that live a natural human life and they live well into their 80s. And by not like well into their 80s, but also they live well into
Hmm.
their late 80s. They're living very well. So yeah, I've been obsessed with this for 8 years, I guess, when I started my journey, and 5 years professionally. And I have a mechanical engineering background, so I'm not in, I don't have a nutrition background per se, but I've kind of used I think my technical skills as an engineer to investigate root causes of problems, and maybe it was even an advantage that I didn't go to medical school or nutrition school
Right.
and kind of get indoctrinated into those systems. I kind of came at it as a third party, and just said, "Hey, what's going on here? Like why are we saying that type 2 diabetes is not reversible when you just need to change your diet, right? That's like the difference
Hmm.
in thinking. It's like when you look at the root cause, you need to figure out the person's diet and lifestyle, and the medical system doesn't seem to be focused on that. They're just, well, let's just give them a pill and put the band-aid approach on it. So I think that's a big difference in thinking. So I'm kind of just trying to justify the fact that I have a mechanical engineering degree and not a nutrition degree. But yes, I think it's helpful to me to understand this stuff.
Now, there is a lot of conflicting information out there, especially in the area of nutrition, and there are some that argue and argue very well in some cases. Why what you and I are preaching, maybe in terms of eat more meat, avoid polyunsaturated fatty acids, avoid basically food that didn't exist a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand years ago, right? Modern foods that we've engineered for whatever reason that our body might not or not yet be compatible with. Maybe we'll evolve at some point and we all run on sugar and poof us. Who knows? I just don't want to be that, leading that pack. But there are some people who argue, very well and pointing to studies and all kinds, that none of that is a problem. In fact, the other day, I'm not sure if you reposted it on Instagram or it was someone else, that PhD in nutrition who said, gluten, seed oils, dairy. I mean, with the dairy, there is maybe a separate argument, but specifically
Mm-hmm.
the seed oils and gluten, they're not a problem. They don't cause inflammation. This is, don't be afraid of that stuff. How do you reconcile that? And how does that match what you've seen, some of those hunter-gatherer tribes do and eat?
Yes, and that's the trillion-dollar question, really. And it's hard to reconcile that because there's an establishment perspective of health and science and the medical schools and all the studies, and there's a lot behind that view, right? And people are know that view, and it's, yeah, eat your whole grains, don't use saturated fat, don't use animal fat, use the PUFAs, use the seed oils. These are better for you, supposedly. Right? Like we know this establishment view, and it's hard to go against that because they have all of their, I don't know, about 70 years of momentum behind it and big forces behind it, big money behind it, studies behind it, big interest behind it. So you're kind of saying we're fighting an uphill battle, and people listening
Mm-hmm.
probably kind of understand that. Like we are the alternative quote health scene, even though we're just saying let's go back to what health always was. But yes, it's an uphill battle. So part of this preamble is saying that it's not super easy to prove. And I do have to go up against these guys. And I did repost that. And it was a PhD in nutrition who thinks that he knows everything. And he DM'd me specifically. And he's just called me a keyboard warrior and that I'm not doing anything. I'm like, actually, I work with a doctor and we reverse disease all the time. I am not just a keyboard warrior. Like part of Sapien behind me is the word Sapien. That's sort of my main like health company. I work with Dr. Gary, and we actively reverse disease, get people off medications using diet and lifestyle. So this is not just theoretical. I'm not just a PhD in nutrition, studying this stuff. I'm actually doing it with a doctor, and we've been doing this for years. And yeah, many other people have done it too, right? This is our whole community is doing this with themselves, or the good doctors out there doing it. So we know, we can see it. We can see the real data behind this. There's real hope there's more case studies and real, people recording this. Like, we need more doctors to actually put this into a formal case study and document all of this. And they have, right? Virta Health did a great study talking about reversing of type 2 diabetes and putting in remission, whatever you want to call it, in just a year using a ketogenic approach, actually. So yeah. Okay. So to combat that, this guy, he was just saying, he also said the seed oils, the gluten, if these were so bad, we should see people walking around with inflammation, and we don't. And that's why I had to repost it. It was like, you've got to be kidding me. That's all you see. That's all you see when you leave. Like, the minute I go to a Costco, it's like a nightmare. People in Costco, they're just wandering around completely overweight, just filling their carts with more processed foods.
I think his argument was, I read some of his other posts, and there are apparently studies that show that even obese people have a C-reactive protein, one of the inflammatory markers, below 0.2 or at 0.2, which I didn't read the actual study. I found it hard to believe that someone obese and overweight has a CRP of what I have. But even if that's the case, maybe then that tells me that maybe CRP is not the only factor you should be looking at, right? Maybe that's a bad indicator of metabolic health,
Exactly. And there's probably many other, it's well known that the obese people have way worse health outcomes. There's many studies that's showing it's pretty linear. Like, as their weight goes up, they die sooner, right? If you're looking at mortality, and it's very linear, correlate with weight. And also there's many other markers too, that just because the CRP may not be, yes, there's the triglycerides and the HDL ratio is probably all off there, or A1C. There's so many other things that we can look at. And you're right. Even we don't even know all the things, right? There's probably even more things we can look at, or even the body. The body's pretty amazing. Like, how it works is it's kind of like becoming obese is almost like a hack for the body to try to stay in equilibrium. You know what I mean? It's like putting all this extra fat and like trying to deal with it. Your body's like trying to keep you alive. And part of that is becoming obese, if that makes sense, right? It's a little bit of like flipping the way you think about it. It's like, yeah, the body is actually doing you a favor. And maybe you don't see all. That's the same thing with, I'm talking about my parents, and they didn't recognize disease, or that even the CDC admits that 9 out of 10 people who have prediabetes don't know it, right? So 9 out of 10 people who have prediabetes, and there's other statistics on how many people have prediabetes. It's like half the population, and 9 out of 10 of them don't know it. That means that this test, it's exactly what you're saying. The tests we're doing aren't good at catching it. If you just get someone's blood glucose when they get the blood labs drawn, their glucose could be semi-okay, or you know what I mean? But they could still have wildly high insulin and all these problems because, like I said, the body is pumping out mass amounts of insulin to keep their blood glucose in check so they don't die. And we don't see that. We don't see that.
Yeah. And that's exactly right, because everyone I talk to, among my family in particular, I'm like, show me your blood work, and I can tell you, if you're healthy. And most of the stuff that I look for isn't even on there. It's not being checked. Yes, there is the fasting glucose. That's one number, one snapshot, but fasting insulin is not on there. And A1C is not on there. That tells you, the last 90 days of your average blood sugar, and all of those things. I'm like, how can a doctor say, you're fine, if the doctor doesn't even have the data? They just look at stuff that if those things are off, then you have that already. I mean, if your fasting glucose is already at 150, you don't need a doctor to tell you that you're in bad shape. And the other thing I've learned, the human body is just so incredibly complex, and I don't think we can fully capture what's really going on inside of us, even with the best designed studies that we have out there. there are just so many layers and feedback loops and all that. Just looking at one thing, and even if you do it very well in a clinical trial or whatever, it might not give you the whole picture. And so just arguing based on studies, I think, is a flawed approach to start with. We should really be looking at, first of all, how are we doing? If it's just, if I want to find out how well I'm doing, how do I feel? Do I really thrive? Am I on top of my game most days? Do I have energy? Do I have, all of those things? And most people, I would argue, can't say that they are thriving. They are not. And so if whatever, that PhD there is saying, don't worry about seed oils, don't worry about that, don't worry about this, by whatever you're doing, are you thriving? If not, then maybe it's time to make a change,
It's super important. The problem is it's pretty subjective. It's also, my example is where I thought I was okay and I wasn't.
Right. Yeah.
It's so hard. I know this stuff's impossible to figure out because, I mean, I was like, I'm doing great. I look back at these photos. My face was like a puffy ball. My stomach was kind of like a puffy ball. I was inflamed. Like, speaking of inflammation, like, you can just see the inflammation in my body. And now, like, I just changed my diet. Basically, I just got rid of the three things that I think are the biggest problems in the modern world and with nutrition is the seed oils, the added sugar, and the refined grains. I call them deficient grains. In the film, we call the SAD 3. The SAD diet is a standard American diet.
Yeah.
So it's SAD. So it's seed oils, added sugar, deficient grains. Because maybe not all grains are bad. Like back in the day, we had some proper preparation techniques. They weren't monocropped, covered in glyphosate. They were ancient grains. They soaked, they sprouted them. You know what I mean? Like, that's a whole different ballgame. And so that's why we say deficient grains. So I'm not saying like every grain is just going to poison you. It's so these three things I think are the root cause of everything. And I kind of just got rid of those three things as much as I could. And then my whole life changed. All these problems went away. My body changed too. My body composition. I didn't ever track calories. I didn't track macros. I didn't work out more. I actually worked out less because I stopped jogging and I started actually throwing some weights around. And I think that's really important. I'm just not into that jogging thing. I'll sprint or I'll walk. I'll sprint or I'll walk. I don't think the steady state jogging thing's a great idea. But
no, it's not efficient if you think about it. If you have to cover 5 miles in distance, would I walk that if I have to do that every day, maybe with a load on my back or whatever, or would I jog? I would definitely walk, and if it's a short distance, if I have to run away from something, I would sprint. I would not jog away from a predator, So from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense that jogging is something that is not very efficient. And maybe there are use cases on why you want to do that, sometimes, but it's hard on your joints and it's, not efficient at the end of the day. I totally agree with that.
That's it. It's not efficient. It's like, I could do a sprint workout in half the time and get, I'd say, a better workout than a jog, even if you call it even, but it still takes half the time. So like, what's the point? I think the efficiency and the density is everything. Basically density is just like, you're doing I believe in nutrient dense eating. And then even like, I don't even know what the phrase is, but it's like dense activities. Like sprinting is a dense, like you're putting it in a smaller amount of time, right? It's like, so I think that's just like the goal of both sides. I say eat densely, move intensely is my little tagline, right? People say eat less, move more. That's like pointless, right? That doesn't tell you anything. Everyone knows they should eat less and move more. But like, that doesn't help anyone, and it's not really effective. And that ties into the jogging thing too. It's like, people think the idea is, I'm just going to cut calories and then jog. I think that's just the worst idea ever. If you're just cutting calories, you're just eating less of the same bad foods, right? So you're actually getting less nutrition because you're just getting less protein, less good nutrients. And then if you're just trying to balance it out by jogging, then I think it's just terrible. I think there's actually a lot of people who like gain weight or like have more inflammation in their joints and even can gain weight around their belly from jogging because it's just a stupid equation. It kind of just makes you hungrier, but you're not really burning as many calories as you think.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. I just don't think it's an effective thing. And I think your body just cares about getting the most nutrition out of the correct amount of calories. I even hate
Right.
talking about calories, right? So it's like that's nutrient density, right? It's like how do I get the most nutrient dense nutrition? And this will lead us to meat and animal foods, but it's like
Right.
how you get it by eating foods that have the most protein and nutrients without excess energy, right?
Hmm.
That's excess calories. And I think that's why animal-based diets work. It's why the sugar added flour or added sugar and seed oils added sugar and deficient grains is so bad. Is they're basically just making your food the opposite of nutrient dense, nutrient sparse,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
You're just adding in this nutritionless filler energy, right? Energy is fat or carbs, and you're just dumping that into the food, and it's diluting out protein and nutrients. And
Hmm.
so even if it isn't okay, we'll go with this PhD's thing and saying, okay, maybe they aren't inherently inflammatory. Okay, we'll do a thought experiment saying it's not. Well, they're still bad. They're still bad because they're
Right.
pushing out all the good nutrition.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And funny enough, my wife and I are watching Alone right now
Oh
on
yeah.
History Channel, I think, where they put like a couple of people for 100 days in the Arctic, close to winter, and and I was like, thinking, I would love to see, a couple of plant-based folks, vegans, be dumped in the Arctic, for 100 days and survive on plants. I really wonder how long that would go. And every participant there, the big thing is big game. They want to hunt big game because that's where the organs are, that's where the meat is, the protein, that's where the fat is that they need. And it just makes sense. If you get thrown out into the Arctic, what it is that you're looking for. It's not the broccoli, it's not the seed oil, it's not the croissant.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
want to get big game, so you survive, and you thrive at the end of the day. And that
You're
that by itself should tell you all you need to know about nutrition.
it seems like it. Yeah, you're not going after little leaves either. And I haven't watched Alone really, but I've heard that there are many I know there's many seasons and that people have
Hmm.
told me that there's many examples of people that they try to go on the show plant-based and they bail immediately. They
Yeah.
immediately don't find enough food. They're trying to collect some
Hmm.
leaves and like maybe a few
Hmm.
berries and they're
Hmm.
starving immediately and they ditch it and then they go for meat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, that's really it. But talking about meat, there has been so much controversy, especially in the last couple of years, about meat and why meat is bad, why processed meat and red meat are, causing cancer or are at least linked to cancer. I mean, you have to be very careful about the wording and really understand what the wording means to kind of, figure out if red meat is really causes cancer, if it's simply been linked to cancer, and what does that
Mhm.
mean, and why is that all BS? What is red meat? What place does it have in human nutrition?
Yeah. Well, this is part of the big question of like questioning the 50 to 70 years of the establishment viewpoint. And so for one, there's so much to it. I have to make a 6-part series on it to get all the info. But yes, I'll start to break that down. So I actually interviewed one of the PhDs. He was a USDA PhD. His name is David Klurfeld, and he was on the panel. It was a working group they call it in the WHO in 2015. So the World Health Organization put together a bogus group of people. They handpick these people um, to try to say that meat was a carcinogen. Right. This is why this data is out there. It's from this 2015 working group,
Hmm.
and Dr. David Klurfeld. I had to get special clearance to interview him. I still think it's the only interview with him out there. And he broke it down for me and told me that they were all a bunch of vegans and vegetarians with a bias, that he brought all these studies that showed the opposite, that it was not harmful at all, that it was, a perfectly great health food that we've eaten for all of history. They didn't use any of his studies. They found ways to throw them out. And they just looked at the ones that they wanted to look at that were associational studies, or maybe I think there's a few like rodent studies they used, and they just made the decision they wanted to, and they completely were biased, completely didn't look at the evidence. And he was the only voice of reason there, and he's not like some carnivore guy. He's just like this USDA scientist, he actually doesn't even believe what we believe at all. I had him on my show and he started talking about how we need fiber. He's like, "Oh, we all know we need a balanced diet and fiber." He's just a classic guy that just believes in a balanced diet, yet he believes in science and reason and knows
Right.
meat is a health food, and that they were biased and insane. So I mean, you could get into all the details, and other people have gotten into the details of why those studies were flawed, what they use, how many studies they threw out, all that. But that's a high level view. There is a world sort of agenda. I don't know what you call it, agenda against red meat. And I'm doing a presentation on it in KetoCon in a month. I call it exposing the $1 trillion agenda against red meat. Because you're kind of asking these questions like why, why is there so much data showing the opposite? Why does the WHO say it's a carcinogen? Why? And I think there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of big interests involved that have agenda to push, and it has to do with climate and sustainability and just processed foods and big industry, and it goes really deep. So I don't want to get into all that, but we can get into the climate stuff. But when it comes to just the simple like nutrition facts, it doesn't make sense, right? Like we know the science of what meat is. It's amazing sources of nutrition. It's bioavailable, and even if you talk about processed meat, it's all this associational stuff, like you said. Is it linked to cancer? Well, I actually don't think processed meat is bad unless you're adding oils or like weird sugar to it. I think people have eaten processed meats all the time throughout Europe. You know what I mean? Like people eat sausage, pâtés, like all kinds of processed meats, prepared meats. That's fine. But what I'm saying is they're linked or they're associated with people eating more junk food.
Right.
Really, like how do people eat hot dogs? I bet there's only a few people in the world that eat hot dogs by themselves. Everyone else in the world eats hot dogs with a bun and sugar, like corn syrup, ketchup, and like and a soda and French fries. So I'll even push back against processed meat. I prefer to eat, red meat by itself and have it in its whole form, but I'll eat some beef sausage all the time. I eat it all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It's just what is it associated with? And that's where we find all the problems. And when people ask me how it all works, I'm like, well, look at the world. Like, why is red meat? How come, it seems to be bad? Or when people cut out red meat, I'm like, well, what else are they cutting out? Or what else are people eating with the red meat? It's like, you can explain it to someone in 2 seconds when you're just like, have we eaten meat for all of history? They're like, yeah. They like get that. And like, okay, well then, and are people sick now? They're like, yeah. So it's like, okay, so we have all these new foods that were just invented in the past 50 or 100 years. They're like, yeah. So like, okay, well, what if it's those foods that they're eating with the meat and not the meat? And they're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like you could just do that thought experiment with someone and they're just like, oh, I get it. And I just don't understand why other people can't figure that out. It's like the most plain to see thing. And that's why I started getting into the bigger stuff on like why there's a worldwide agenda, because it's so obvious, right? It's so obvious that meat is a health food and it's scientifically nutritious and protein and bioavailable nutrients. I'm like, why do people like it doesn't make any sense? And then you have to go, oh, okay, well, people are trying to sell you fake foods. They're trying to control the food supply that, just make money. They're trying to do all these different things. That's the only way it makes sense because it's so obvious.
Right. Cool. You mentioned climate before. Maybe let's talk a little bit about, cow farts. I'm sure that's one of your favorite topics too, and why cows are so bad for the environment. And then let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your experience that you've had with the hot sun.
Oh yeah,
because I'm really keen on learning what you have learned.
Yeah, that kind of puts it all together. So the climate stuff, the environment stuff, it's a huge story. It's kind of nuanced. So I have a company called Nose to Tail, and we do regenerative meat. Like we do the best meat, right? So I do definitely support that. I get it, right? And people might know of rotational grazing or holistic management. And there's all these different practices that help move the cattle around. They're grass fed, they're grass finished, they don't get the grains. And right, this is the best way to do things. And this helps build soil and soil health lets the water actually penetrate and soak up into the soil. It puts carbon back in the soil. There's all these benefits, and you can do a whole podcast on regenerative agriculture, and I've done many of them. But then there's the other way to do it, which is our conventional system, right? And even though I have my meat company that does the best way, I still say all meat is okay, because I know that our system now most of it involves just normal store-bought grocery store meat, and that not everyone can afford the best quality meat. And I'd love it if everyone supported their local ranchers and all that. But like the way we're doing it isn't so bad with cattle. At least, like, cattle aren't in a cage. Like, that's not how it works. I mean, they're in a feedlot at the last couple months of their life, and they're not on grass. They're sort of on like maybe mud, but they're not caged up. They have plenty of room. They choose to come close to each other, or they choose to go get the grains, whatever they feed them, and you could snap a photo and it looks like they're in a cage. They're not. And that's actually pretty efficient. So it's weird because I have to kind of support the feedlot system, but which I don't believe. I think we need to like phase out that and do more regenerative ag. And I think you can do so many versions of growing plants and animals together on mixed use farms and doing all kinds of things, and that we can get there. But then for now, I don't want to scare people away from going to the store and getting what meat they can afford, because it's pretty efficient. We've got these systems. These systems didn't happen by accident. They happened because it became really efficient, and we could use. It's almost like recycling wasted goods, and they get to go to the cows, right? We grow a lot of corn for ethanol, and so they make the ethanol, and they have this byproduct, and the cows get to eat it instead of that ethanol fermenting and giving off methane somewhere. You brought up the cow farts, which actually cow burps is mostly where the methane is.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having all these wasted food items that would just sit in landfill or something and create methane, the cows eat them, right? And same thing with distillers yeast. They eat a lot of these distiller grains that are left over from making beer and alcohol, and then the cows can eat them. Maybe it's not ideal, and I'm sure there's tons of problems with the industrial, cattle system, but it's like they're actually using these inputs that we can't use, and they're turning it into good meat.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of nuance there, but I think most of the problem would actually be more on the chickens and pigs. Those are, I think, raised a lot worse. They're raised in these giant warehouses, and there's like 1 million chickens in one spot. And yeah, they actually take up way more feed, because chickens and pigs have more similar digestive systems to humans. They're monogastric, and they require more protein, right? And cows, they don't require barely any protein. They eat grass, right? And so they take something we can't eat, and they upcycle it into usable protein. Chickens and pigs require more protein, so it's actually not as good to eat chickens. People are always saying, "Oh, it's like better for you," and it's just so bogus, because it's less nutritious, and it's less, or it's like raised worse and requires more inputs. So, man, yeah, I don't know what else to get into with the climate stuff. It's a big topic. Even the land use. I mean, cows on grass is a good thing for land. Vegans will say, "Oh man, they're using all the land." Like, that's good. You want them out there eating the grass, putting their manure down, doing all that. Like, that's not bad. And there's much of the land in the world is not usable for crops.
Right.
It's like, this is good.
And we don't have cattle, but we have like 16 or so chickens in our backyard, and we rotate them every 2 weeks. And you can clearly tell. I mean, and we did it on our regular lawn, so we didn't, just let them out, and you can tell where the chickens were a couple of weeks later once we moved them off. How the grass is growing, without using any extra fertilizer. I mean, it's the chicken poop basically that fertilizes, and you just move them around, and it's good for the soil. It's good for the animals, obviously. And I mean, with chickens maybe a little bit different things, but especially with grazing animals, you very often put them on places that cannot be used for, growing any crops. So you're not taking away from, producing corn or soy or whatever. You're basically regenerating land that would be useless otherwise.
And I think we should take away some of that land for corn, wheat, and soy.
I agree. Well,
people ask, "Oh, can we feed the world like this?" I'm like, yeah, I think so. I mean, we do have quite a few billion people out there, but we got a lot of land out there too. And if we didn't
Mhm.
grow so much corn, wheat, and soy, we could use that, and you could use mixed systems where you could, on the same land, you could run pigs and chickens and cattle and food. You can still
Mhm.
grow food, and people are doing it. Like Gabe Brown, he's doing it in I think it's North Dakota. I don't Probably North Dakota, not South Dakota. He's doing 5,000 acres. Last time I checked, that's not small. He's doing some big stuff,
Mhm.
doing them all together, using all the right methods, and he's
Mhm.
making money. It's profitable. It works. He's feeding a lot of people. This is what we
Yeah.
can do.
All right, cool. Let's switch gears now and let's talk about your trip to Africa and living with the Hadza. What you've learned? What was it that surprised you that you didn't know before, and what kind of confirmed what you already knew or thought you knew?
Yeah. Wow. So I have read the studies about them, and so all I really knew was that. And the studies make them sound like they're very plant based. Actually, the studies, they're like, oh, they eat like 120 types of vegetables, and they eat a high fiber diet. So that's what I thought going in. But I heard other people saying otherwise, but I didn't know. So also, I want to say I'm not the Hadza expert either. I visited two groups, right? So these
Mhm.
two groups wasn't a sample size of all the Hadza in Tanzania, and who knows, man? Over the years, there's so many different groups, so many different areas of land where they do different things. Also, actually, the biggest thing to think about is whatever we're studying in the last, say, 50 years is not reflective of how they lived throughout history. I think that's a
Mhm.
major problem because they used to get gigantic animals and be able to hunt anything they wanted. And there were, even if we're talking about before like 12,000 years ago, there was megafauna roaming around, gigantic creatures all over the world that we could have hunted. And then those eventually died out. So we had smaller animals to choose from. And then even more recently, they have way smaller animals to choose from because now all the animals are protected and they're in game reserves, and the government just makes money off them for tourists. And the Hadza are pushed off into little slices of land that has no animals on them. So that's the biggest thing to consider is this is not how humans, this is not an accurate reflection. But doing with what they can, they do just get animals every day, and they're just smaller animals. And so, again, I'm not a Hadza expert, but I did, spend time with these two different groups, and they, all the men were together, and then the women were separate. And all the men did was go hunting, eat meat, and hang out. That's all they did. It was great. And yeah, I didn't see them. They were not eating a high fiber diet. Like the most surprising thing too was even with the tubers. The Hadza are famous for eating a lot of tubers as well. You probably heard. And
Mhm.
so then I did go and hang out with the women and some of the younger people, and they roasted some tubers, and then they gnaw on them, and then they just spit out the fiber. Like
Because it
they
was too
didn't eat.
fibrous.
Yeah, I mean, these tubers were very fibrous. You didn't get much nutrition out of them, and they weren't eating the fiber. Like they spit it all out. And I tried it, yeah. And you chew on it, you get a little bit. You get a little bit of glucose. Sort of. It's like, oh, am I getting any food? Like maybe I'm just getting a few
Mhm.
calories here, and then you just have
Right.
to spit it out because it's just pure fibrous. And
Mhm.
so yeah, I don't think, I don't know. I think there's just some misunderstandings. I think a lot of these people, like there's a Herman Pontzer's a Harvard guy that studies them a lot, that I actually got into some arguments with, and he like backed out of doing an interview with me, but uh, he's not a fan of me because I'm like kind of debunking what he's talking about, but he's the expert and I'm just an idiot. So that's so, I'm like, I think these guys, they're like, and I've read Herman Pontzer's books, and I know what he thinks. He's like, we need a whole grain diet. It needs to be a balanced diet. They come in with these views, especially Harvard
Mhm.
people, and they put that onto what they see. So maybe they'll like see them. They're like recording. They're like, ooh, they ate like 3 tubers today, and then like so much fiber. I'm like, no, but they ate like 0 grams of fiber from those three
Mhm.
tubers.
Right.
Maybe they got fiber elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, they have to resort to eating some like pumpkin leaves. I saw the women, but they actually were tearing out a lot of the fiber too out of the leaf. They would get, and this is also just the modern thing because they have no food, they have no land, so they have to eat
Right.
stuff like pumpkin leaves. And still, they were tearing out the fibrous bits. But anyway, you can see how like you can kind of show it however you want.
Right.
If you have this idea that they eat a high fiber diet, then it's like, oh, let's count all the giant tubers they ate as, you
Hmm.
know, 3 pounds of fiber. So
Right.
all I saw was them caring about meat. But maybe that's, again, maybe they were putting on a show for me because they knew I was an American who was interested in meat.
Hmm.
I
Right.
don't know. I didn't see them
Mm.
caring about anything else but meat. And all the questions I asked them, they're like all about hunting, all about the meat. The best day of their life was the biggest animal they got. All it was focused on was meat, and they would all eat every single bit of the animal. So when we first showed up, they happened to already have gotten a tick tick. It's like this little like antelope type thing, like a mini
Mhm.
little antelope. Immediately they slice it open, they take the guts out, and they gave me some liver. Within like 2 minutes of this animal
Mhm.
being opened, we were eating the liver raw. We were eating it
Mhm.
on their dirty knife with their dirty hands, never been washed. Their hands have never been washed. Their knife has never been washed, and it had guts on it too. So I was like, oh, wait a second. There's like some yellow green stuff on this liver, because they just cut the guts open. I'm like eating
Right.
little bits of the guts, all the stuff that's in the colon. Like it was a little dicey, but I just ate it, and it tasted fine, and they loved it because I don't think they're used to like people eating it. I think they
Right.
offer it, and then no one wants it. But
Right.
yeah, they eat the liver first raw, and then they open up the animal and they cooked it by the fire, and everyone's just hanging out, and they put it on sticks, and you kind of just let it cook, and they just
Mhm.
eat it all. They just gradually like ate every bit of it. They had the head. There was a kid, maybe like 12, 13, who was just part of the adult group now. He was gnawing on the head. He like cooked the head. It was like gnawing like every bit of thing off the head, and then
Mhm.
cracked open the skull, and then we ate the brains. It was kind of cooked like a little pudding.
Mhm.
And I tried the brain. It was the first time I've ever had brain. But yeah, man, they
How did that
they ate
taste?
every bit of it. Tastes like nothing. It was just kind of
Uh,
like a tasteless pudding.
mhm.
But yeah, they ate the whole thing, and then they go out and get another one. And yeah, they didn't have any access to big animals, so they had to get the next day we went on a long hunt with them. It was pretty crazy. We didn't bring enough water. They didn't even bring water. They don't even care about water, which is a whole nother thing. They like are adapted to not need much water. It's
Mhm.
pretty cool. And they also don't eat salt. I think there's a relationship. Like they don't really eat much salt because they don't have salt around, but they don't need much water.
Mhm.
Something's going
Hmm.
on there. But we went out on this long hunt with them, and they got a baboon, and they got these little fur babies, bush babies they call them, these little marsupial animals. And so that's what they have to rely on. But they came back and they ate the baboon. Politely declined. It looked a little dicey, and I didn't have any of the little the bush babies. But yeah, they basically just go out and get whatever animal they can, and then go eat it.
What about carbs? Do they have any carbs?
They have honey, so depending on the season, they would and the availability, they would try to get honey. So I have no idea how often that would be, or if
Mhm.
how seasonally that would be, but that would be their main carb source, it seemed. And they opened up a tree, and they got the honey out, and it was actually like it was really dry. Like the honeycomb didn't have much honey at all. So that's an example of
Mhm.
like all day. We kept telling them. We told our guide like we want honey, we want honey. They finally
Mhm.
found it, and it was like bone dry. You can kind of chew on the wax. You got some honey. It
Mhm.
was fine, but I don't think it was like an everyday thing.
Right. So, funny enough, you said, they don't eat a lot of salt, they don't drink a lot of water, especially in the ketogenic world, there's a whole thing about, oh, you have to make sure you supplement with electrolytes because if you're, not getting any carbs, then your electrolyte balance might be off and stuff. How does that work? I mean, I know that if I don't have carbs and electrolytes, I don't feel well on a very low carb, high fat diet. And I'm
That
like, but it doesn't make sense, for me to feel not good because I would probably not survive or thrive in an environment where I just don't have carbs or salt for that matter.
It's a great question. That's why I'm saying I'm not the Hadza expert. I didn't spend enough
Mm.
time with them to know. Like maybe as soon as we left, they like crushed like 10 potatoes, or you know what I mean? I have no idea. Like,
Right. Yeah.
uh, I think maybe, or they are very well adapted to that environment. They've been
Mm-hmm.
doing that for, hundreds of thousands of years, and they just have a different, way their body works. And or if, like, I was kind of thinking, if you don't get that much salt, you don't need that much water, or the opposite. If you don't have that much water, your body conserves,
Right.
salt in a different way. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Or maybe
Yeah.
they drink, they have some blood, they're getting some of the electrolytes in the blood because they're eating,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of this fresh raw stuff. It's hard to figure
Right.
out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Okay. Last thing that I want to touch on the hot side is dental health. Are they flossing and brushing 3 times a day, rinsing and doing all the things that
Well, this is an
Most.
interesting one, because actually I should talk about the Maasai. So the Maasai, people may know as the famously drinking blood and milk, right? The
Mm-hmm.
men drink blood and milk, and they could do that only for 6 months at a time. They would only drink blood and milk as their diet, and they have amazing teeth, amazing health, very tall people. It's amazing. So I think they have better dental health than the Hadza. The Hadza, well, okay, there's a problem. The Hadza we were with, they did have access to tourists. So they actually, these guys didn't have great teeth because they had all these tourists
Mm-hmm.
coming in, and I saw them. They were bringing them candy and snacks and all this stuff. And so, but then the other group, I said we were with two Hadza groups. The other group did
Mm-hmm.
have very good teeth, and
Mm-hmm.
they weren't the tourist group. And
Mm-hmm.
there's especially a girl. I was took a video of on my phone of this girl, teenage girl, the best teeth you've ever seen. I'm like, this girl's like a
Mm-hmm.
tooth model, and she lives in a grass hut in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane. And same thing with other women. So I'll tell you, the tourist group, a lot of candy, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
treats, and they look kind of like brown, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't great. I, but just through Weston Price's studies as well, people know who Weston A. Price is. Did a
Mm-hmm.
lot of study on the dental health. These people did not have dental problems. They did not have floss. Although, here's another one that I actually been thinking about recently. The second group had sticks, and they had this certain stick, and they would kind of like rub off
Mm-hmm.
like excess stuff, which is kind of well
Right.
known. Like, if you don't, there's like calculus that builds up,
Mm-hmm.
but if you
Mm-hmm.
just rub that off, you're fine. And so no, they
Mm-hmm.
did not have toothpaste, they did not have floss, they didn't have all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. They did rub off things,
Mm-hmm.
and they did have amazing teeth. And
All right. Interesting.
mhm.
All right. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. I much appreciate your time and all of your insights and the information you shared. It was learned a lot. I really like that, and I'm sure our audience will learn a lot as well. Is there anything else you want to share? Where can people find you? You mentioned you have your own meat company, so if someone wants to get the best meat possible, raised in the United States, regeneratively raised as well, where can they find you? I know you have an Instagram channel that's fairly popular. I've been following you for a while, even before we connected, and I really like your stuff. There are a lot of no nonsense kind of
Mhm.
information. So, yeah, where can people find you?
Yeah, my meat stuff is nose to tail, so it's nosetotale.org. And then on social media it's eat nose to tail. And then Food Lies is the name of my film or docu-series, and then I do my content under Food Lies. So if you just search for Food Lies on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and yeah, that's about it. And yeah, I guess the wrap up is with the, I kind of alluded to it earlier about the whole Africa experience. Is they lived well, they lived long, and this is what I saw. We were asking them more questions about, hey, like, do you have back pain? We're kind of asking them all the standard American
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Like, when you turn
Right.
40, 50, they're like, what is back pain? And they couldn't
Mm-hmm.
even figure it out. And then our translator, he grew up with them, so he's a great guide, and so he really could speak their language. And we're like, ask them, and they're like, do you mean like if you fell out of a tree? I'm like, yeah, like this. We fell out of a tree once, and my back hurt. We're like, no, no, no. But other than falling out of a tree, they're like, no, no, no
Uh,
one has pain. It's like, do you have knee? They're like, no, no, no. They're like, we're asking the women, do you have trouble with menstruation? Do you have trouble each month? Is it hurt? They're like, what are you talking about? Like, do you have trouble giving birth? They're like, no. No. Do you have any problems? Like Mary, I was with this nutrition expert, Mary Ruddick, and she was asking all these questions, and they're just like, no, 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 we don't have any of that.
mm-hmm.
And we asked all the different groups, the Maasai, the Hadza, even the Batwa, the Pygmies in Uganda. It was all the same story. and the older people seem to be even healthier because the younger people kind of grew up with worse nutrition. They kind of grew up in more when these processed grains would be coming in that they have to survive on, and they were more sickly, uh, worse health problems, and all these other more modern problems. So yeah, I just want to throw that in as like kind of the higher level view of going to Africa. It was just amazing how they they did, unless they're in the cities, they didn't deal with all the chronic issues that we see. And I could it's and in Uganda, a lot of the cooking oils, they call them cooking oils, which is just seed oils, they were coming in to the cities, and I think they were taking a toll on the older people, like or the middle-aged people seem to be, some of them very obese. Like everyone else seemed to be very in shape. Like there's this perception that in Africa they're just like starving, and I don't think that's the case unless you're in the Saharan desert. Sahara Desert, like most of Africa is actually pretty abundant with food, mainly plant foods though. So I mean, it's not ideal. They're living off bananas in Uganda, but everyone looked fine. But then they started they didn't have any fast food either, and everyone's looking okay. But then they had these cooking oils, and they started getting the cooking oils in their diet, and they're frying stuff in it. And then I think it was catching up to people. So it seems like they're on this trajectory, just slower than the U.S., where if you start introducing in these seed oils, they start creating the metabolic havoc down the line. And so, yeah, that's what I saw.
Okay, maybe one last follow-up question in terms of body composition, because you mentioned it, especially between men and women. So do the men look more like the Liver King or more like you and I and Saladino? And how do the women compare? Are they, do they have more body fat, or are they skinny like, a female CrossFit athlete?
The men, well, okay, it depends. The men definitely look way more normal, like a fit, normal person. I'm actually pretty thin. I'm not like as muscular as some guys, but I think they look more like me, right? They're like lean and thin. They don't have muscle like Liver King, no. And even the Maasai, they just look correct. You know what I mean? They're not like Liver King. They're not like an Ethiopian marathoner, that you'd see running a marathon. They're just like, oh, that's what a person's supposed to look like. That's what, and the women too. I mean, it's hard because we didn't see that many women, and in the city, it was like hit or miss. But like everyone just looked like a normal human and what we could look like. And then in the cities, that's what I'm saying is the women seem to carry a lot more fat than the men, and especially around middle age, there weren't. It seemed like everyone under 40 seemed to be look great in general. In the cities, well, in Uganda at least, they were doing okay. They didn't have the processed foods yet, but then once they hit 40, the women seemed to blow up very quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I guess with that, we're going to wrap it up. Again, thank you so very much. I'm going to put all of the links and information that, to your meat company, to your Instagram account, etc., down in the description so people can look that up and follow you. Highly recommend that. And yeah, we're going to edit that video and put it up on YouTube here shortly, and I'll send you a link once it's live.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michael.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.